Begin today the Gemara on Daf Ches Amud Aleph, 7 lines down from the top of the Yamud, where it says Omar Mar. So the Gemara here is going to explain a Braise that was brought to explain the Mishnah that says that the Karbonis that are brought Yom Kippur in the Beis HaMikdash are Mechaper for the Tumah. If a person walks into the Beis HaMikdash Tameh. So there are different scenarios of a case where a person is Tameh and he walks into the Beis HaMikdash. One is where a person had a Yediyah B'tchila, he was aware in the beginning that he was Tameh, then he forgot, and then there's a Yediyah B'Seif, he finds out in the end. In such a case, you have to bring a carbon chatas oila v'yayid. Then there's the case where there was no Yediyah in the beginning, and there is a Yediyah in the end. So regarding that, the Mishnah said, which carbon chatas on Yom Kippur is mechaper? The carbon chatas that's brought as a musaf, with which the blood is just sprayed outside. It's not brought inside the Beis HaMikdash and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Then there's a carbon chatas where he had a yediyah in the beginning, forgot, but then did not remember afterwards. So he doesn't know to bring any carbon. So until he brings a carbon, the sa'ir, the goat that was brought and that was taken into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's the one that's mechaper for this avera. So this brayse here brings the source in the pasuk, which is in this week's parsha. It says, "V'chiper ala kodesh mitumas b'nei Yisrael v'gaimer." So what's the tumah? Mitumas b'nei Yisrael. It refers to this tumah of a person that walked into the Beis HaMikdash when he was tamei. Okay. And now the Raisa explains, how do we know it's referring to this tumah? We find other things in the Torah that are called tamei. Avodah Zarah is called tamei, Gilei Arayis is called tamei, Shvichas Damim is called tamei. So the Raisa brings two opinions. Rabbi Yehuda says because the tumah of Mikdash is different than other tumas that was just mentioned. Now here the Gemara will focus on that and explain how it's different. Because it's different, we know that when it says here, v'chiper, kodesh mi tumas, not all tumas, mi tumas, it's this tumah that's different. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says, no, the pshat in the pasuk itself is very simple. V'chiper al ha-kodesh, tumas b'nei Yisrael, which means that it's kodesh. The tumah that a person was metame when he walked into the Beis HaMikdash or ate from kachim when he was tameh. So it's clear in the lashon of the pasuk itself. So the Gemara will explain both of these opinions. Let's see. So the Gemara Amar. So the Tana of the Braisa said, this is Rabbi Yehuda. Yachel, I would think that al shalish tumas halol yesar mechaper, that the soil brought inside the Beis HaMikdash and Yom Kippur could be mechaper for all the kinds of tumas. Talmud laima mi tumas v'loi kol tumas, only from some of them and not all. And which one is it? Ma matzinu, just like we find shechal like a cause of miklal kol atumas b'tumas mikdash v'kedashav, that the Torah singles out that the tumah that there is when a person walks into the Beis HaMikdash or eats from kachim is different. So afkan b'tumas mikdash v'kedashav, here when the Torah says that the soil is machaper for tumas mikdash v'kedashav, it's this one that's different. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, this is what Rabbi Yehuda says. So the Gemara explains my cholak. What exactly is different with the tumah with Kodesh HaMikdash that we say that dafka this is what the Torah is referring to? So the Gemara answers, the Maisi ba'oila v'yayid. It's different than other kinds of tumas because this has a unique carbon. You bring the carbon, which is oila v'yayid, for a rich person, it's an expensive carbon, for a poor person, a poor carbon. So this is unique, and therefore that's what the Torah meant when it said mi tumais, that the side on Yom Kippur is mechaper. Fragt the Gemara, eime avodah zarah. But if it says mit tumah, it's only one that's unique, maybe it refers to the tumah of avodah zarah, which is also unique in its own way. Umay cholak, what is unique about avodah zarah that's different than everything else? And here there's a siman avodah zarah, yeladas, mitzayda, nazir. These are going to be the four cases that the Gemara will discuss, that maybe they are the one that the soir and Yom Kippur is mechaper. So what's unique about avodah zarah is the maisi seira v'loy kizba. By Avodah Zarah, the only thing that's the carbon chatos that you bring for Avodah Zarah b'sheigig has to be a goat and not a lamb. By any other Aveda that you bring a carbon chatos for, you have a choice, either a goat or a lamb. But Avodah Zarah, the Torah said, is different. You must bring a seira. So maybe it's that difference that the Torah here is saying mi tumah, that it's this thing that it has tumah. Avodah Zarah is called tumah, that the soir and Yom Kippur is mechaper. Amar Rav Kahana, so Rav Kahana says, no, this is not the kind of difference that we're looking for. Anan cholak lahakol kamrinan. We're looking to find a certain tumah that has something that's unique about it, that's a leniency. And once we find that leniency, we say, oh, because of the leniency, this is the one that the Torah gives this kapara on Yom Kippur. But by Avodah Zarah, here we see that it is different, but it's a chumrah that you must bring dafka a goat for the carbon chatos. So because it's a chumrah, that's not a reason to say that the Torah is singling it out, that it would get this kapara on Yom Kippur. The Gemara asks, maybe I should say that when it says mitumis, it's referring to which tumah? The tumah of Yeledes, a woman that gives birth. So for her, she has to bring karbanis. And maybe if Yom Kippur will pass, so then the sar of Yom Kippur will be mechaper for her, and she won't have to bring her karbanis. And now the chalak, the tumah by Yeledes, the carbon that she has to bring is also different. And the maisa oila v'yared, because by Yeledes, her carbon is similar to the carbon of by tumah, that it's oila v'yared. For a rich and poor person, it's different. So according to Rashi's pshat, the Gemara is actually asking that this Yeledes, she gives birth and she's supposed to bring these karbanis. But if Yom Kippur passed and the sar that's done b'fnim was already brought, she won't have to bring a carbon. It'll be mechaper for her, and she doesn't have to bring a carbon at all. That's Rashi's pshat. Taisvis, however, and the other Rishonim say regarding this case and the following cases in the Gemara here, that it's not talking about a Yeledis to say that she won't have to bring a carbon at all. It's talking about a case of a Yeledis where there's a suffix. If she has to bring a carbon, there was a birth, or was a miscarriage where it's not clear if she's chayav to bring a carbon or not. And the carbon on Yom Kippur would be mechaper until she finds out whether she's chayav in a carbon or not. That's what the Gemara means. Similar to the way it is by the Tumah, where it's mechaper until the person finds out. So the Gemara explains, Amar Rav Hoshiyah says, it's not referring to the Yeledis, because the pasuk here, it says, L'chol chatoisam, that it's mechaper for someone that's tamei, but for a sin that he did. But v'loy l'chol tumasam, it doesn't say in the pasuk that it's mechaper for a case where you need to bring a carbon for a tumah. The Yeledis didn't sin. She's tamei, she has to bring a carbon, but there's no sin involved. So we know that it's not talking about the Yeledis. That the fact that a Yeledis has to bring a carbon is also because there is a sin involved in the birth. And so Michael and Meimar, so what are we going to answer? We could still say that it is the Yeledis. What did Rab Shimon ben Yochai say? That when a woman gives birth, as the Gemara says in Nida, so because of the pain of the birth, she swears and says she's never going to have relations with her husband again and never give birth again. And then she breaks it. She goes and gives birth again. So that's why she has to bring a carbon. There is a sin involved. And so the Gemara, Rab Shimon l'taimei. You're right, according to Rab Shimon, if this was the source, the lashon of the pasuk, mi tumais, and you're looking to see which one is singled out, it could be the Yeledis. But Rab Shimon follows his reasoning, as I mentioned before, the Amma mimekayma yomuchra. Rab Shimon says, from the language of the pasuk, it says v'chiper al ha-kodesh mi tumais. That lashon itself shows that we're talking about the person that was Tamei and walking to Kodesh, or walking to the Mikdash, or ate from Kodesh. Maybe what the pasuk here is talking about is that the Soyer on Yom Kippur is mechaper for a Mitzayre. The Mitzayre, after he becomes tired, also has to bring karbanis. And when the Mitzayre brings the karbanis, his karbanis are also oila v'yared. It's different for a rich and poor person. So that is different than all other karbanis chatos. Maybe that's what the Torah is singling out, that the Sar of Yom Kippur will be mechaper for him. Amar Rav Hoshiyah, so again Rav Hoshiyah says, it says in the pasuk, l'chol chatoisam. It has to be for a sin. And therefore by a mitzayre, there's no sin. He was tamei, now he's tired, it's just the Indian of tumah. And therefore, v'loy l'chol tumasam, it's not just coming to be mechaper for a tumah. Like the Gemara, there's no sin by a Mitzayra, but Rav Shmuel ben Nachmani, the Hamar, Rav Shmuel ben Nachmani says that al shivet dvarim the goyim bain, a person that's a Mitzayra, it's because of 7 different things that the person may have done, and this is listed in the Gemara. And the first one, the famous one, is Lashon Hara, but there's many others that it says there. Gasas Ruach, Shvichas Damim, all kinds of things that Negoyim comes as a kapara for this. So then Michael and Meimar, so what are you going to say? When it says Yelachol Chatoisam, maybe it's referring to a Mitzayre. And says the Gemara, Hasam, by a Mitzayre, Nige de Echapele. Once he had the Nega, and he had to remain Chutz Lamachna and everything that comes together with the Nega, that's the Kapara. The carbon, Lishtarui Bekol. Afterwards, once the tum is already removed and he has a Kapara, the carbon is just that for him to be allowed to come Bekol, and or the other gersi here is Lishtarui Bekochim. That he should be allowed to eat from kachim, but not for the kapara itself. The kapara is done already. So therefore you can't say on the mitzayre l'chol chat toisam that his carbon is for a sin. In fact, the Gemara, how about another case, ve'emin nazir, maybe regarding a case of a nazir that is not allowed to be metame himself. And then if a nazir was metame himself, he has to bring karbanis. Maybe it's for the nazir that the Sar of Yom Kippur is mechaper. And why is a nazir different? It says mit tumis. What's the difference about the nazir? So again, Veiman Nazir Tame, the Chalak, we see that his carbon is different. The Maisi Tairim Ubnei Yaina. He Bechlal brings a cheap carbon. It's not even Oil of Yared, it's a leniency. He doesn't bring a behema. His carbon for the Tome is just birds. Maybe that's what Yom Kippur is mechapa for. Amar Avayshia, so again Avayshia says, it says L'chol Chataisam, has to be for a sin, and by Nazir, V'loy L'chol Tumasam, not for the Tumah of the Nazir. In fact, the Gemara about Rabbi Lazar HaKaper da Amar, Rabbi Lazar HaKaper says about the Nazir, that Nazir Nami Chaytahu. The Nazir is also a sinner. The fact that he takes upon himself to be a Nazir, not to drink wine and so on, to separate from all these things, that's a sin. Because a person should not be mitzayir himself to not drink wine. The Eibishter says what's allowed, what's not allowed, and it's not necessary for a person to add and be mitzayir himself. So he is a sinner. So Michael Meimar, what are you going to say? And Taisus over here adds, we're talking specifically about a Nazir that became Tameh. So when he was metam himself, not only did he accept upon himself to be a Nazir, but because now he was Tameh, he has to start over as Naziris again, and he's prolonging this. So he's doubling this thing. So he's a chayte in that sense. So maybe that's what the pasuk is referring to in the kapara of the Sar in Yom Kippur. Answers the Gemara, you're right, according to Rabbi Lazar HaKaper, we're going to have to say that Savr Lo Rab Shimon, he holds like the opinion mentioned Rab Shimon, that says, that from the language of the pasuk it says, Kaidesh, Mitumais, we know that it's not talking about a Nazir, but it's talking about a person that was Tameh and ate from Kachim or came into the Kaidesh, into the Beis HaMikdash. This is the explanation of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in this pasuk. Now, Omar, the Tana said, Rab Shimon's opinion, Rab Shimon Oimer, in the lashon of the pasuk itself, it's clear that it's talking about the soir being mechaper for the person that's Tameh and came into Kodesh. Harei Oimer v'chiper al ha-Kodesh mitumais. So that means mitum asai shel Kodesh cholo. That's from the tumah that you brought into Kodesh. So the Gemara asks, Shapekam Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon is saying, very simple. Why does Rabbi Yehuda have to make a diak from the term that it says in the pasuk mi tumais, and that from that we know that it's referring to something unique? It says clearly Kodesh mi tumais. And says the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda Malach, Rabbi Yehuda will tell you how that term that it says in the pasuk v'chiper ala Kodesh it's coming to teach something else. Haomi Bayale, it's coming to say that Kihechi the Ovid Lefnai Lefnim, that when it comes to this sar, this goat that the Kaim brings into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and sprays the blood in front of the Orain, so whatever is done inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Hachi Navid Behechel, similar has to be done afterwards. You come out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim inside the Hechel of the Beis HaMikdash, the Kain sprays the blood, similar to inside Achas Lamayla V'Sheva Lamata against the Pareiches. So that's the pshat of the pasuk here. When it says v'chiper al hakodesh, what it's saying is in the kodesh. He goes into the kodesh hakadoshim, and then he comes out of the kodesh hakadoshim, and he has to spray the blood also on the pareiches, which is called kodesh. That's what this part of the pasuk is teaching. For Rab Shimon, and so Rab Shimon, how does he know this? Hahu mivchein yasenafke. He learns it out from the continuation of the pasuk. After it says v'chiper al hakodesh mitum b'nei Yisrael. It says v'chein yaseh le'oil moyed. So it says clearly that this should be also done in the oil moyed. So you don't have to learn it out from the term kodesh. But Rabbi Yehuda will respond to that and say that lashon of the pasuk itself is not enough of a source, because if it was just the fact that it says v'chein yaseh b'oil moyed, maybe I would make a mistake and say that it's saying neisi par v'soyer achrine v'navid. That maybe the pasuk here is saying, "V'chein yaseh," whatever you did inside in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, repeat it and do it again with another bull, with another goat inside the oil mayid. So therefore, Kamash Malah, and therefore the pasuk is saying this term, according to Rabbi Yehuda, when it says v'chiper ala kodesh v'chein yaseh. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, actually, when it says kodesh refers to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's saying whatever you did in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, v'chein yaseh, it's the same that you do for this same carbon outside of the Oil Moed. Not that you bring a new soir and a new par. That's why it has to say both terms. It has to say v'chiper ala kodesh, and then it says v'chein yaseh, that you understand exactly what has to be done. So there's no extra, there's nothing in the pasuk that would now tell you which tumah are we talking about. That's why Rabbi Yehuda was medayik from the term mi tumais. But for Rab Shimon, however, Rab Shimon disagrees. Rab Shimon says v'chein yaseh lo'el moed minei mashma. When it says the term v'chein yaseh, you wouldn't think that you have to bring another par and another soir. Just that word v'chein means that whatever you did inside with this soir and this par, you now do inside the el moed. So therefore, the term ala kodesh mi tumais is extra, and it's teaching that we're talking about the tumah of kodesh. The next part of the brayse it said, "Oh mamar." So I would think I'll call tumas shebekodesh heisar zemechaper. when the pasuk here is saying that the Sa'ir on Yom Kippur is mechaper for tumah in Kodesh, maybe it's for all kinds of tumah in Kodesh. And that, in other words, what the Brais here is clarifying is, maybe this would be even in a case where the person is chayav a karban chatas, oilav yayid, because he had the yidi in the beginning, he had the yidi in the end, and he forgot in the middle. And even for the case where he's chayav the karban, maybe it would be mechaper as well. So Talmud Loima, the pasuk says, mi pishayim l'chol chataisim v'goyim. It uses the term mi pishayim, which is unusual. Pishayim is for amazed. Why does it use the term mi pishayim? So my niyu, what is this case? Yesh b'yidiyah b'tchila v'yesh b'yidiyah b'soif. If it's a case where the person was aware in the beginning and he's aware in the end, then he forgot in the middle, so then hay bar karbanu. Okay, now this is actually a question now that the Gemara is asking on this answer of the Braisa. So let me just first clarify again. So what the Braisa is saying is, when it says mipishayim means that it's similar to a mazid. Just like by a mazid there's no carbon, so too, what kind of case are we talking about? That the soil of Yom Kippur is mechaper for tumah, a kind of tumah where there's where the person is not bringing a carbon. What is that? When he had no yediyah b'soif. He didn't realize what he's doing, so he's not bringing a carbon. That's the kind of case that it's mechaper. And not the case where he had a yediyah at the beginning and a yediyah in the end. So now the Gemara here is asking, so my niyu, what is the case that this Braisa is coming to exclude and say that it's not going to be mechaper for? Yesh b'yediyah b'tchila v'yesh b'yediyah b'soif. The Braisa wants to know, how do you know that it's not mechaper for the case where he had a yediyah in the beginning and in the end? But the question is, hay bar karbanu, that the person is obligated to bring a carbon for this. If the Torah says he's chayav to bring a carbon, obviously the Sar of Yom Kippur is not mechaper. If the Sar of Yom Kippur is mechaper, so then he wouldn't have to bring a carbon. So why do I need a special pasuk to explain that that's not what the Sar of Yom Kippur is mechaper? Answers the Gemara, no, lo tzricha, the case of areas would be as follows. This yada le samach l'shkiyas achama. That the person on Erev Yom Kippur, right before Shkia, that's when he had the yediyah. That's when he found out that he walked into the Beis HaMikdash when he was tameh. And he didn't have any chance to bring a carbon. So I would think, the maisi, until he'll bring a carbon after Yom Kippur, nitlile, the Sar of Yom Kippur would suspend any punishment that Hashem would give him. As Rashi says, any Yisurim, until he brings that carbon. He didn't have a chance to bring it before Yom Kippur. So yeah, he has to bring the carbon, but since he didn't have a chance, maybe I would think that the Yisar of Yom Kippur is mechaper for this. So therefore we learn out from the pasuk, it says, l'chol peshayim, it's only mechaper for something which he didn't have a yediyah yet, and therefore there's no chiyuv of a carbon yet, because he doesn't know what he did. Further, the Braisa says, Omamar, the Braisa goes on to say, L'yesh ba yediyah b'tchila, ve'ein ba yediyah b'soif, shesar zeh toile minayin. This that we're saying, that when he had a yediyah in the beginning, and he did not have a yediyah in the end, that's what the sar is toile for. It suspends any punishment on the person. How do I know this is specifically what the case that it's mechaper for and not another case? So the Gemara explains, Michael Kashile, what is the Braisa asking here when it says minayin, Michael Kashile, this minayin that it's asking here, what is the question that it's coming to ask? So the Gemara explains, this is what the Braisa is explaining. Hash to the Omrit, now that you explained based on the Lashon of the Pasuk, that it has to be Chatoyim, Dumya de Pshayim. We're talking about an Aveda that's similar to Pshayim, which is B'mezid. What's the similarity? Ma Pshayim, the Lav B'nei Carbon, just like a Pshayim B'mezid, there is no carbon that you bring for this. Av Chatoyim Nami, the Lav B'nei Carbon. So to here, we're talking about something where the person is not bringing a carbon yet for this, and therefore that's what the Sar of Yom Kippur is mechaper for. So I would say maybe ma pshayim de lavane carbon la'olam. So maybe take this a step further and say, just like by pshayim, when a person does an aveda b'mezid, there's no carbon that the person ever brings for this. So maybe av chatayim de lavane carbon la'olam. Maybe we're talking over here about a kind of a tumah that the person would never come to the obligation of bringing a carbon for this, and only that is what this Sa'ir of Yom Kippur that's brought inside is mechaper for. Or my ninu, what case would that be? Ein ba yediyah b'tchila, but v'yesh ba yediyah b'soif. If the person had no awareness in the beginning of this tumah, even though he finds out later, this is a case that'll never bring a carbon, because that condition was never met in the beginning. You can't ever change that. So maybe it's this case that the Sa'ir of Yom Kippur is mechaper, avo yesh ba yediyah b'tchila ve'ein ba yediyah b'soif. But in a case where the person did have the awareness in the beginning, then he forgot, and now in the end, he still didn't remember anything about this. So in such a case, maybe the Sar is not mechaper. Why not? Because kivin dechi misyadale, Because when he's going to find out, bar karbanu, then he'll have to bring a carbon for this once he finds out. So I would say that the Sar of Yom Kippur will not suspend any punishment for this person, because the pasuk says Pishayim. Pesha is the case where there's no carbon at all. Now, if you'll argue and say, this case that we're suggesting that the Sar that's brought inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim is Mechaper. When there's no Yediyah B'tchila and there is a Yediyah B'Sayf, so how could you say that the Sar that's brought inside is Mechaper? For that, the Mishnah goes on to say that Sar Hanase B'chutz V'yem Kippurim Mechaper. There's a different goat. There's the goat that's part of the carbon Musaf that's done, and the blood is sprayed outside together with Yom Kippur is Mechaper on the person. So how can we say that we need a kapara for that? You don't need a kapara for that. The Sar B'chutz is Mechaper for that. Says the Gemara, no, the Brais here is clarifying, maybe I would think to say, maybe it should be in the opposite. Because the pasuk speaking about the side inside uses the term pishayim, maybe dafka this side is mechaper for a kind of aveda of tumah where it never will come to a karban chatas, like a pesha that never comes to karban chatas. So therefore the Brisa goes on to say, Omakra, the pasuk here after it says mipishayim, it says lichol chataisam, for a chatas. Miklal b'nei chatois ninu. So from this I see that it's a chatos, meaning that it's a case which could come to a karban chatos. What case is that? When he had a yediyah in the beginning and he forgot, and he did not have yediyah b'seif, but he could, if he'll find out, then he'll have to bring a karban chatos. So if that's the case, why wouldn't we say that the soil that's brought inside is mechaper for this person completely? And then after Yom Kippur, he doesn't have to bring a karban chatas even when he finds out. How do you know that it's only mechaper temporarily, it suspends, but later when he finds out, he would still have to bring a carbon? Answers the Gemara, because iksiv mechataisam. If the pasuk would say that it's mechaper mipishayem mechataisam, then I would say yeah, it's mechaper from the chet altogether, kiddukamrit, like you suggested. Hashtu dechsiv lichol chataisam. It says it's mechaper mipishayem lichol chataisam, for lit when you till you'll come to the chatas. That's what it means. Lahanach da'asu liklal chatas. That's only till it will come to the klal of a chatas. When he's going to come to remember, and then he'll be chayav a chatas, then he'll have to bring the karban chatas. Fragt Gemara, but what does this mean? So if it doesn't atone for this person completely, eventually when he'll find out, he'll have to bring a karban chatas. So lama toila. What does it mean that it's toila? Toila means it suspends something. It's what exactly is it accomplishing? If anyways, when he finds out, he'll be obligated to bring the karban chatas. Amar Rab Zeira, so Rab Zeira says, loymar she'emeis meis b'loy oven. If this person died, and he never found out, until he died, he never found out that he did this aveda. So then he's dying without this sin, even though he never brought the karban chatas to atone for the sin, but because Yom Kippur had passed, and it was toile, so now that he died, so we say that he's dying without any sin. But Rav asks on this, that's not what it's for, because in Meis, once the person died, Misa Mimarekes, the Misa itself cleanses the person. So if you never found out about it, so then he didn't bring the karban chatas, but the Misa itself cleanses for this. You don't need Yom Kippur to say that he died below Yavim. Hello, Marave. So Rava says, what does it mean that it's Taila until he finds out, and then you will have to bring the karban chatas, lahagin olav min hayisurim. It will shield him, it will protect him from any suffering until he brings the karban chatas, until he finds out. You may think, well, he still has the aveda. When he finds out, then only then he'll be mechaper. No, so the Yom Kippur will protect the person from yisurim until he finds out. Okay, in the Mishnah it said, Ein ba yediyah b'tchila, if it's the opposite case that we're discussing. Again, till here we're discussing the case where the person was tummy and walking to the Beis HaMikdash. He had a yediyah in the beginning, he was aware in the beginning, he forgot, and then he walked to the Beis HaMikdash, but he didn't remember in the end. Which side of Yom Kippur is mechaper for this? The side that's brought inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. But then there's the opposite case of Ein ba yediyah b'tchila, where in the beginning he had no awareness, and he walked into the Beis HaMikdash, and then v'yesh ba yediyah b'sayf, in the end he realized what happened. So for this, you never bring a karban chatas. What's mechaper for this? Soir hanasa b'chutz v'yem kippurim mechaper cholo. The soir that's brought part of the musaf outside in the outside mizbeach and Yom Kippur. That's what's mechaper for the person. Okay, so the Gemara asks on this. Mechdi, let's see. Iskushi iskush lahadodi. we find in the pasuk that the sar that's brought outside is compared to the sar that's brought inside. That's b'chlal how we know that the sar outside is mechaper on a similar thing to what's brought inside. As the Mishnah brought the pasuk, and as the Gemara here brings, that the Gemara will bring here in the pasuk, but the lashon of the pasuk it says is that v'chiper Aaron al karnaisav. Just a second, I don't know if they bring over here this pasuk that's where the hekesh is. The lashon of the hekesh of the pasuk is. Does Rashi bring over here this pasuk? Iskushi iskish. No, I don't see Rashi bringing over the pasuk either. Just a second. In the Mishnah, it brought the pasuk that it's compared to the sar that's done inside. Okay, it's a lashon of the pasuk by the Musafim in Parshas Pinchas, where it brings the karbanis over there. It says that the sar outside is mechaper like the chatos that's inside, like the chatos that's brought inside. Okay, so the question is, if the Torah is comparing the two, okay, so let's see again the lashon of the Gemara. Mechti, let's see. Iskushi iskush la'adadi. The sar brought outside in the pasuk is compared to the sar that's brought inside. If so, v'nechaper pnimi adidei ve'adechitzen. The sar that's brought inside should be mechaper on what we said before for the case of where there was a yedi in the beginning and there was no yedi in the end, but also on the case that we just said is mechaper by the sar brought outside. On the case where there was no yedi in the beginning and there was a yedi in the end, there should be mechaper on that as well. If the Torah is comparing the two, so then that means that the mechaper the same. So the sar inside should have the kayach to be mechaper. Also for what you're saying, the sar outside could be mechaper. You're going to ask, if the sar outside is mechaper for that, so what do I need the sar inside to be mechaper for what the sar outside is mechaper for already? So the Gemara says, v'naf gemina, and the relevance of this would be, leheche deloi avad chitzen, in a case where only one sar is being brought. Rashi here says, let's say they don't have enough goats. So they're only going to bring that goat that's brought inside. And then later on, when they have to bring another goat outside, they don't have an additional one. So since there's a hekish in the pasuk between these two, I would say maybe in such a case, the sar that's brought inside has the power to be mechaper for both. For the sar, for the both kinds of avedis of where there's a yediyah betchila, or even in a case where there isn't a yediyah betchila. Answers the Gemara. Amakra, but the pasuk says achas. The lashon of the pasuk is achas bashana, which means kapara achas mechaper. Regarding that goat that's brought inside, it's only mechaper on one thing. Ve'ena mechaper shtei kaparis. Only one kapara and not two kaparis. So even in a case where there is no goat being brought outside, and it would be necessary to have the inside goat be mechaper for both, it won't work. It's only mechaper for the case that's inside, which is in the case where he had a yediyah betchila. Now the Gemara asks on the opposite as well. V'nechaper chitzayin, since we see the Torah compares these two, so maybe I should say the opposite. V'nechaper chitzayin adidei v'amai de'ovet pnimi. Maybe it should be mechaper for the kapara that applies to the one outside, as mentioned, and that's the case where there is no yediyah betchila, and there is a yediyah b'seif. That's what the carbon of the chitzayin, the side outside, is mechaper for. But it should also be mechaper for the one that's inside. Now, when would this be relevant? You bring the sar inside and you bring the sar outside. Each one has its own purpose of a kapara. So the Gemara explains, when is this relevant? Nafkemine, the relevance would be in a case, letume de'ira ben zelezeh, in a case where the sar inside was brought already. And now a person became tamei. In between the two sirim, a person became tamei. And he had a yediyah betchila. And he walked into the Beis HaMikdash, and then he still didn't realize what he did. That's the case that the Sar B'fnim should have been Mechaper, but it was already brought. So now maybe the Sar B'chutz should have the ability to be Mechaper for that. Right, so over here, the Gemara didn't say that the relevance is if you have only one Sar. Because if you have only one Sar, you bring the one B'fnim first. You already brought that first. So you're not going to bring the Sar B'chutz now. So the Gemara on this as well. The Gemara says, "Oh Makra." There's another pasuk where it says again the term achas bashana. It says twice. It says again achas bashana, which means kapara zu leitehei ela achas bashana. That this kapara is only once in the year, which means it's a kapara only for one aveda, one kapara, and that the one that's brought outside is a kapara for one aveda, and that is for the case where there was a yediyah only basayf and not a yediyah betchila, and the sar that's brought inside is also for only one aveda, and that's in the case where there was a yediyah betchila but no yediyah basayf. Those are the two kaparas in these two karbanas.
So where's he going to get this kapara?